This college football season has given me more than a subtle reminder to expect the unexpected. And while I have grown more accustomed to expecting the unexpected and enjoying it, something that I did not see coming was UCLA beating Rutgers after traveling 3 or 4 time zones to the East Coast. And they didn't just beat Rutgers. The only reason the final score was UCLA 35, Rutgers 32, is Rutgers punched it in with under 2 minutes remaining with no timeouts and basically had to rely on an onside kick to have any chance at winning the football game. I did not expect that whatsoever. And all I have to say is UCLA got a much-needed win. What a job by Deshaun Foster and his staff and his players, with one player in particular, quarterback Ethan Garbers, showcasing an elite performance. What a job by the UCLA Bruins. And as for Rutgers, this is a painful loss, and I don't know where Rutgers goes from here. But we're going to be talking about these two teams today, and before we really dive deep, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, to like the video, to share this content around to other college football fans who will enjoy our content here. Also, click the notification bell so that you can get notified when we release new content here on College Football with Sam. Comment your reaction to this game down in the comment section below. And also in the comment section, you will find a few links at the top where I have a pinned comment. In that pinned comment is a link to my merchandise store, my Patreon page, my Discord server, and my College Football with Sam Twitter handle. Please visit all of those links. The Twitter and the Discord server are free. Twitter, you just have to follow me, and the Discord server, you just have to join with your own free Discord account, and we can talk college football 24/7 on the Discord server, where we have close to 100 members now, and I want to get to over 1,000 before the season ends. And if you want to support the channel monetarily, well, you sign up on the Patreon page as an All-American, All-Conference, or Heisman member. And if you want to wear something like this, for example, little College Football with Sam t-shirt, you can get it in a Rutgers theme, a UCLA theme, or any theme in any of the 18 Big Ten school colors. So there's a lot to check out on the merchandise store, the Patreon page, and the links that I have in the description and in the pinned comments. So please do those. But sharing, liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, commenting, watching the video all the way through, and hitting the notification bell, those are the things that are going to be the most helpful to you and also to me. So thank you very much for doing those. But let's get back to the topic at hand here. This was shocking. I actually did not catch this game live because there were other games that I was watching that I was interested in. Nebraska-Indiana was going on during this game, and my eyes were glued to that matchup because it was, in my view, one of the bigger matchups of the weekend. It turned out to be incredibly one-sided, but I still watched the whole thing because this was Indiana's best opponent and Nebraska's best opponent by a long shot. So I figured that there was a lot to learn even when the game was clearly over. But I went back and watched this game, and a few things stood out to me. A, Rutgers' defense, whether they are healthy or not, has taken a step back from last season. The angles that defensive backs, linebackers, defensive linemen, just the angling, the tackling, the overall skill level has regressed. And at the end of the day, that's what led to UCLA scoring, 5 touchdowns. UCLA had 5 scores, all of them were touchdowns. And Rutgers is a team that is typically not going to win a game if they allow 5 touchdowns, because Rutgers' offense, as we have known for several weeks now and as we suspected entering the season, is going to have some limitations. The reason why I picked Rutgers to win 10 games, which is now impossible unless they win out and win a bowl game, is because I thought that their defense would be a top 15 unit, top 20, top 25 for sure, and they would improve on the offensive side of the ball due to all the offensive linemen they were bringing back and the fact that they returned Kyle Monungai. Kyle Monungai had 3 rushing touchdowns in this game. He averaged over 5 yards per carry. Ethan Kaliakmanis actually did a pretty okay job, had an average or maybe above average performance at quarterback. But at the end of the day, Ethan Garbers played at a high level, at an elite level, and UCLA's defense did just enough that, combined with Rutgers' limitations on offense, that the Scarlet Knights couldn't outscore UCLA. It was a very interesting game. If you have the time, I would recommend that you check out the Rutgers versus UCLA webpage or on ESPN rather, and you get to see some pretty intriguing statistics, like the fact that Rutgers was given a 68.4% chance to win this game per FPI, and it was about around that number. It steadied in the 60s in win probability for much of the game. UCLA scored an early touchdown, but then Rutgers responded, and then it was about late second quarter, both of the teams went on a scoring run, a 14-3 scoring run in favor of UCLA right before the half. Rutgers came out of the gate and had a 9-0 scoring run for the first 2/3 of the third quarter, a touchdown and a failed 2-point conversion and a field goal. I feel like Greg Schiano going for 2 that early in the third quarter with the touchdown was indicative of the fact that he did not have faith that his offense could score more touchdowns reliably, and he thought that, you get the 2-point conversion, we can better afford to take more field goals. In hindsight, if you kick the extra point there, UCLA, not UCLA, but Rutgers isn't out of it with 10 minutes and 35 seconds left when they also failed a 2-point conversion in the fourth quarter, again with 10:35 left. Rutgers and UCLA both averaged 7 yards per play, and Rutgers actually had the points per play margin edge here. They had a 0.026 points per play margin, which means that for every one of Rutgers' plays compared to every one of UCLA's plays, Rutgers scored 0.026 more points. And that is because UCLA had more plays. UCLA had 69 total plays. Rutgers had 59. So UCLA had 10 more plays. They were extremely successful through the air. UCLA was not the more balanced team. Rutgers had the more balanced attack on offense. And I would also say, overall, when you just, it's so weird. You look at the stats here and they suggest it's a close game, but push comes to shove with home field advantage and with the fact that, for example, Rutgers had 3 sacks and 6 TFLs. UCLA only had 1 sack and a TFL. Rutgers had 135 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, 4.7 yards per carry. UCLA had 95 rushing yards, 3.1 yards per carry and a touchdown. I give you all that information, and you probably still lean Rutgers to win just in a close affair. But then when I give you that Ethan Garbers averaged 10.1 yards per attempt and had 383 passing yards and 4 touchdowns, that would tell you that, yeah, UCLA wins this game because Rutgers cannot overcome that type of performance from an opposing quarterback. It was Ethan Garbers' best game of the season. Dare I say, I want to check his game log because I don't want to make a mistake here. I think it's the best game of his career, if I got to be honest, in terms of he had 38 passing attempts and he had a QBR of above 90. And it was on the road against a Rutgers team that I thought entering the game was at least okay. I had doubts about them after Wisconsin, but losing to Wisconsin and losing to UCLA, 2 different losses right there, especially when UCLA is traveling across the country to play you in your own house. Rutgers and UCLA were even in the turnover battle. UCLA had more penalties, 9 for 49 yards, while Rutgers had 3 of 25. At the end of the day, the reason why UCLA won this game is because they scored 5 touchdowns, and Rutgers, while they scored 4 touchdowns, had to settle for 2 field goals, and they had 2 failed 2-point conversions on top of that. So this was a very back and forth affair. Rutgers had over 400 total yards. UCLA had 478, just around 56, exactly 56 more yards than Rutgers did. UCLA had 24 first downs to Rutgers 23. And UCLA also controlled the clock, which I think played into how they were able to break some tackles, sustain some drives. Rutgers' defense was worn down throughout this game. UCLA had two touchdown drives of over 5 yards. They also had 3 touchdown drives. They had 3 touchdown drives of over 5 yards. And they had 2 touchdown drives that were under 1 minute. I think I switched minutes and yards there. That's my bad. But 3 touchdown drives of over 5 minutes and 2 touchdown drives of under 1 minute. There. I got that correct. But it was a very close back and forth affair, and I can't help but think that Rutgers is falling apart after this game. We like to talk about the winners last. We save the best for last on this channel. So as for UCLA, you get to wait, because we like to talk about, again, the winners last. We save the best for the end. That way we end off on a high note. Let's get the bad out of the way first, and that's Rutgers football. They started off 4-0, had a key win against Washington on Friday night in conference, and then, ever since then, they've been on an 0-3 record overall. Ever since. Now they're 4-3, 1-3 in Big Ten conference play, and yikes. Rutgers on their schedule has several opponents left who could totally snipe them. Rutgers could miss a bowl game based off of how they've been playing. They could also still win 7 or 8 games. So the range of outcomes for the Scarlet Knights, in my opinion, is pretty wide. They play a team in USC this Friday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Pacific Time on Fox against a Trojan team that, to be frank, is also imploding. USC started out 2-0, and they are 1-4 since starting out 2-0, which is pretty sad because that aligned with my preseason prediction for the Trojans, which I didn't feel like was correct, but I think I had something. I obviously was correct in part there, but then I abandoned that prediction in the preseason because, I don't know, I was kind of impressed with how UCLA at the time, or USC rather, was, well, able to compete with Michigan. But then it turned out that Michigan wasn't any good, and the Minnesota loss looked bad. The Penn State loss was a choke job. It showed how good USC was, at least at their peak, but they couldn't finish. That's a winnable game, given who USC is, and also given who Rutgers is. Minnesota, winnable game. At Maryland, winnable game. Hosting Illinois, winnable game. All 5 of their remaining games are winnable. But are they going to win all of those games? I don't believe so. No. Rutgers does not have enough dynamic talent and explosivity on the offensive side of the football, and they're not all of that dynamic on defense either. I mean, look at this. Rutgers under Schiano is a defensively led team. They love defense and special teams. That's what they're focused on. And to a UCLA team who couldn't finish drives, who couldn't move the ball all that well on Hawaii, on Oregon, on Penn State. You look at other teams too that UCLA has played. UCLA is 2-5. They're 2-5, guys. They were 1-5 entering this game. They couldn't do anything against Indiana, and they lost to Minnesota, where Ethan Garbers threw 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions. This is a team that is probably better than their record indicates, but they're not good. They aren't. And I credit them for this win here. But as for Rutgers, a UCLA fan will tell you Rutgers, well, they should have expected to win this game. They didn't, though. They didn't. And I think to myself that allowing 478 total yards, 35 points, 10.1 yards per pass attempt, and 4 passing touchdowns is pretty humiliating. That is pretty humiliating, guys, to, again, a UCLA team that didn't put up more than 20 points this whole season. They didn't put up their highest point total all season was 17, and they achieved that against LSU and Minnesota. That was their point total high. And then they doubled that against Rutgers on the road, multiple time zones over. Imagine if Rutgers traveled to UCLA. You probably give UCLA an extra touchdown, or you subtract a touchdown from Rutgers, meaning that UCLA wins this game by double digits, or at least by 2 scores or a full touchdown, if this was being played in the Rose Bowl. Just not a good showing whatsoever by Rutgers, especially on the defensive side of the football. And again, poor tackling, bad angles, not reading the play properly. Yes, Rutgers' defensive front stepped up at times, but I think some of that also has to do with UCLA's own limitations on offense, because they do not have a good offense. By the way, speaking of UCLA's offense, it was very weird, but also very cool seeing Eric Bieniemy on a college sideline, because when I saw him in the blue UCLA uniform with the headset, I thought to myself, he looks awfully familiar. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, Eric Bieniemy, former Washington Commanders and former Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator, coaching at UCLA. Like, it's very weird, and not weird as in it's bad or in it's good. It's just, it's something that if you told me 2 years ago, and I don't know much about the NFL, but I knew that Eric Bieniemy was with the Chiefs forever, and people were constantly saying how he should get interviewed for a head coaching job. If you told me that he'd be the OC at UCLA, like just 2 or 3 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it, if I'm being honest. It's weird. It's welcome, because it's another familiar face in my mind. He's another familiar face to see. And also, it's kind of cool when you see college guys and NFL guys going to different football jobs at different levels. But anyway, I do think that Rutgers here is in danger. I think that something that is quite obvious now, and has been for the past few weeks, is that Rutgers has a permanent ceiling. Again, they could miss a bowl game. 6-6 and 7-5 looks challenging. Is 9-3 hypothetically possible? It's mathematically possible. But looking at power ratings and looking at how this team's performed, it's going to be very hard to achieve. In fact, that might be impossible. Rutgers can beat any of their remaining 5 opponents, but saying that Rutgers can beat any of their remaining 5 opponents is not the same thing as saying they will or should beat all 5 of their opponents, because there's fatigue, there's travel, there's different matchups, there's the fact that, well, these teams are not through the regular season. So while we have a good idea of who they are and what they're made of, we don't know as much about them as we will in the future. Like when Rutgers and Michigan State play each other at the end of the season, we will know even more about those teams, perhaps far more than we do now, especially since the Big Ten hasn't even completed half of their conference games. They've played through their non-conference games, and outside of USC, no Big Ten team, I think outside of USC and UCLA, no Big Ten team has completed more than half of their conference schedule, because UCLA and USC in the final week of the regular season play non-conference opponents, Notre Dame for USC and Fresno State for UCLA specifically. But Rutgers could miss a bowl game. They could. That Nebraska loss looks bad, seeing how Nebraska got pancaked by Indiana. Their win against Washington doesn't look all that good or impressive. Their win against Virginia Tech is what it is. Like, Virginia Tech has a high ceiling, but a ridiculously low floor. You look at how Rutgers performed against Wisconsin. That was ugly. That was bad. This was also an ugly and bad loss. Wasn't a blowout, but I think we can all agree that Wisconsin would be favored on a neutral field by several points over UCLA. Greg Schiano, in his career, has a 91-98 overall record, 38-77 in conference play. And since 2020, when he was rehired by Rutgers for a second stint, he's been 23-31 and 10-30 in Big Ten conference play. So I'm saying that to say that my prediction that Rutgers would go 10-2, that 11-1 was possible, that after the first few games they played, that 12-0 was possible because UCLA was beginning to show some cracks. Rutgers, well, they were undefeated and they were finding ways to win. And Nebraska was showing some cracks. Wisconsin looked far worse at the beginning of the season than I expected them to. Well, a lot of these teams that I just mentioned, like Wisconsin, they're improving. A lot of the teams on Rutgers' remaining schedule are improving. Nebraska hasn't improved, but Nebraska beat Rutgers. Rutgers missed that opportunity to earn a road conference win. UCLA is a team that is clearly improving, and I think they caught Rutgers a bit by surprise, and they beat them, and they earned that win. I mean, again, they led by 10 for much of the fourth quarter. UCLA did. They led by 10, and for parts of the fourth quarter, they led by 16. It was a really good win for UCLA, and that can be said and is true at the same time as it was a very bad loss for Rutgers. It was. I wonder if there is a ceiling with the Scarlet Knights. Like, are they not going to be better than 7-5, 8-4 every year? And there's a very good chance of that happening. The Big Ten's a very competitive league. This is not the American. This is not the Big East. This is not it's not even the ACC or the Big 12. This Rutgers team may have an extra win or two if they played in the ACC or the Big 12, of course, depending on the schedule they got, because there are some pretty darn good football teams who are better than Rutgers in both of those conferences. But that's a question that I have for you. If you're a Rutgers fan, by all means, answer in the comments below. Or if you're just a college football fan and you think you have some insight, please let me know in the comments below. Let's get to UCLA, though, before closing out this video. This was a critical win because they now stand at 2-5, 1-4 in Big Ten Conference play. They do have a conference win. Pardon me. And there's hope, not just for this year, I think more so for the future, because Greg Schiano's a good coach, and his teams are fundamentally sound, and you traveled multiple time zones over, all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast, and earned a win. That's something to be proud of. By the way, UCLA in this game, inside their own 20, 4th and inches, and Deshaun Foster goes for it, and converts it, and extends a drive. That right there is admirable. I watched that play and I got excited. I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. He and his players will do anything they want to win. They have juice. They have excitement. And I think that you look at the remainder of their schedule, are they going to go bowling? Well, they already have 5 losses. So given that they have to play Nebraska on the road, Washington on the road, Fresno State's not a pushover in the Mountain West, and then USC and Iowa, they host those teams, but they profile is better than UCLA. I would say going bowling is unlikely, but I didn't think UCLA would win a conference game this season. I didn't think that. And I didn't think they would reach 4 or 5 wins, given that they played LSU in the non-conference. And let me tell you something about UCLA's schedule. They've played Indiana, Oregon, and Penn State. Those are 3 of the top 10 teams in America. If you want to think that LSU's top 10, which I think they're top 15 for sure, potentially top 10, but if you think they're top 10 too, along with those 3, 4 top 10 teams, at least 4 top 15 teams. We all know that Indiana and UCLA are certainly, or Indiana and LSU, again, my apologies for mixing up some names, are top 15 for sure. And Oregon and Penn State are certainly top 10. In fact, many would say they're unanimously top 5. The schedule's only going to get easier because Nebraska is a team that's going to be playing in many close games. UCLA can beat them. I wouldn't pick them to or favor them to right now, but they could beat them. And I think Deshaun Foster and his staff and his players will take that all day. If they can win, doesn't matter if they're favored, they'll try their hardest. And I've seen that against Rutgers. I watched it against Penn State when Penn State really just played bored and beat UCLA, but UCLA was trying, going for it on fourth down, trying to get touchdowns, being aggressive. We saw it against Minnesota, and I think you saw it against LSU too, and they were giving LSU a first half scare there in Baton Rouge. Iowa at home. That's a game on a Friday night. It's late at night. It's a time change for Iowa. That's a little bit of a trap game for the Hawkeyes. That's a winnable game. Washington is not a special team. It's a winnable game, and it's a familiar environment for UCLA because, yes, it's a road game, but it's a former Pac-12 conference game. So there's some familiarity there. USC is a rivalry game. It's at home, and USC may quit. I could see them quitting if they suffer some more losses. They could also finish the year strong because they've played in a bunch of close games. They could be 7-0. There's a world where USC is undefeated right now at 7-0. There just is. And then they have Fresno State, UCLA does, to close out the year on November 30th. That's a winnable game, and that's a game where I honestly would pick UCLA to win. So there actually is a path to go bowling. It's not likely, but UCLA can afford one more loss and still go 6-6. They can. So there's a path. It's not likely, but I do think another conference win is likely, whether it's against Washington, USC, Iowa, or Nebraska. And none of those teams can really afford another loss, except for maybe Iowa, because Iowa at this point is already out of the Big Ten championship race, out of the college football playoff race, and going 8-4 at Iowa is, well, it just is what it is. It's all right. But Nebraska, they can't afford a loss to UCLA. Washington can't. USC can't. So UCLA is going to be playing, I think, spoiler to one of the final four Big Ten teams that remains on their schedule. Again, their remaining schedule is as follows. At Nebraska, after they have a bye this coming weekend, hosting Iowa, traveling to Washington, hosting USC, and then hosting Fresno State to close out the 2024 season. And what I think all this goes to show is that the Bruins should not be underestimated because Rutgers was favored to win this game. I thought that Rutgers was going to pick up not a blowout win, but a pretty dominant win because I've viewed UCLA for this entire season as kind of being an afterthought, if I'm being honest, not being a good team, a team that has some talent in the trenches, some talent on defense, some at receiver, a good amount at running back, and a teeny bit at quarterback. But they're figuring themselves out, I think. Chip Kelly left UCLA in tatters, and you saw that in the game against Hawaii. But now that we know how good Indiana is, they got better after that Hawaii game and were a better team when they played Indiana. They were a better team the following game against LSU, better against Oregon, better against Penn State, better against Minnesota, and they finally earned a win and got better against Rutgers. And Ethan Garbers, newsflash, he's my game MVP for this matchup. What a performance. So do not underestimate UCLA going forward. Don't do it. Jalen Berger, he had a receiving touchdown. And Jalen Berger is a player that didn't do much of anything at Michigan State. So they brought in several transfers entering this year and some returning starters too, who are not world beaters, but they're actually doing a good job of scheming them and of giving them touches when needed and putting them in positions to win. This was a good game by UCLA. Again, 35-32, UCLA beats Rutgers. And today, or not today, but Saturday, they had 478 total yards, 5 touchdowns, 10.1 yards per pass attempt, 3.1 yards per carry, and they led in this game for 54 minutes and 3 seconds. The first touchdown that they scored, the first, in the first quarter, that first touchdown, they actually, the better statistic, my bad, the better statistic to mention is that they led or tied for 60 minutes. And they really led in the game. They led for like 40 minutes. They led for the entire second half. My math in this was off. I forgot that Rutgers tied it up in the first quarter. That's my bad, guys. But they shouldn't be underestimated. When you put up 500 total yards, on Rutgers. It was the best offensive performance that anyone has had on the Scarlet Knights this season outside of Wisconsin. I know that Rutgers is banged up, but regardless, not a good look for them. Good win for UCLA, and my MVP for the game is quarterback Ethan Garbers. 32 of 38 for 383 yards, 48 rushing yards, 5 total touchdowns, and a 96.6 quarterback efficiency rating. It was the best game of his career. Congratulations to him. Watching him tightrope the sidelines on that long touchdown run was awesome. It was electric. And as for UCLA, if Ethan Garbers puts on a performance like this, they're definitely going to win another game. If he is able to consistently not play at this level, because this is insane and is not sustainable, but if he plays better than he did for the first half of the season, I think that UCLA can win a few games on their remaining schedule, not just 1 or 2. UCLA and the Bruins, they can certainly compete for a bowl spot. Is it likely? No, but they're mathematically in it, and they can afford a loss. So take from that what you will. Thank you all so much for watching the city. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thanks to Crash2488, Brascal Rascal, and Kylie OH for being Heisman members. Thanks to Chris Lane, Ismar, Tyler Nye, Jilton Kush for being All-American members. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, Will Loftus for being all-conference members. Have a great day, everyone. Make sure to check out my merchandise store, Patreon page, and Discord server via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Go Bruins, and go Scarlet Knights. See you guys soon.